what is the West? And what do we mean when we say that we are Western? What is Western civilization? As we begin our journey together studying some of the great works of Western literature, this is one big question hanging over this unit of study, but also the whole degree, because the whole degree in some sense is based on this idea of Western civilization. We like to talk about studies in the School of Liberal Arts, being studies in Western civilization, and this unit is called The Great Books of the Western World, and the textbook is an anthology of Western literature. So what does this concept even mean? What is the West? What do we mean when we use the term the West? I'm going to walk you through some of the different ways that this concept of the West or Western has been understood, before positing some of my own thoughts on the matter, and then linking these ponderings, I guess that's probably all they are, back to the course of study that you're about to embark. I'm going to begin by talking about some false conceptions of the West, and you might have come across some of these in your travels. The West is often characterised, and I think rightly, as a synthesis of two major cultural streams, Greece and Israel, Athens and Jerusalem, Christian and pagan Greco-Romanism. In one way or another, most people think that the West is a mix of classical Greece and Christianity. And particularly the Christianity, when we talk about classical Greece and Christianity, the Christianity we're referring to is really the Christianity of Western Europe, or Latin Christianity. Now, most people agree with this, roughly speaking. Okay, so we're roughly speaking, everyone's on the same page there, but they differ on which elements contribute to which aspect of Western culture, and what people emphasise in their explanation can depend on which aspects they're most interested in. Different thinkers and theorists explain the existence of what we call the West in different ways. So I'm going to do a brief survey with some significant attempts to define what the West is. But before I get into this, let me lay out some unhelpful and inferior ways that the West is characterised. And we've got kind of two corners here. In one corner is the definition of the West that is perpetuated by certain elements that we might characterise as left-wing. I'm not referring to the centre-left, the Labor Party left, I'm referring more to the radical left, to define the West as a culture which perpetuated economic injustice, so capitalism, social injustice, so patriarchy, sexual injustice, repression of LGBT people, and religious injustice, with dominance of Christianity over against all other forms of religion. In other words, the West has become associated with anything bad that has happened in the cultures that spawned from the western part of the Eurasian continent. One example comes from the Guardian newspaper. It's not hard to find examples of this kind of thing in the Guardian newspaper. Van Baden is one of their columnists, and she writes this about the West. Quote, "When not applied to discussions of city plumbing and poetry reading, the words Western civilization denote a racist colonial project to crush, change, enslave, eradicate, and genocidally erase other cultures. To civilise is a verb that divorces people from the values of their own community and indoctrinates them into another's. Historical rhetoric polarises the civilised Westerner as superior to dehumanised savages, primitives and barbarians of the late 18th to 19th century common use." End quote. So that's what you might characterise as a left-wing characterisation. However, the right don't get off scot-free. In another corner is the definition that's perpetuated by elements we might characterise as right-wing, except by right-wing, I'm referring to sectors of the population who find some affinity with things like fascism, Tienism, white ethno-nationalism, and other less sinister things as well. But I suppose I'm referring to the reactionary right, or we might call it the alt-right in some circles. Obviously that's hard to define, the alt-right, but let's use that shorthand. I think we might know what we're talking about. For this group, Their definition of the West is highly idealist and ideological. They have a white, Franco-Anglo-Teutonic Germanic understanding of Western culture. And they often like philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche, composers like Wagner, and for them the West is an aesthetic. Grand castles, well-attired monarchs, dramatic scenes depicted in paintings of European glory, awe-inspiring opera overtures. You don't have to look very far on the internet to find those examples. So, the left delights to tear down the West as associated with anything that they dislike. The right likes to praise the West for anything that they like. Indeed, for both elements of the left and the right that I've mentioned here, the West is actually, I think, an aesthetic thing. For one, it's an aesthetic of the past and an aesthetic of present oppression. The left see it as a past and present oppression. For the other, it's an aesthetic of lost grandeur. The problem is that neither the West of the left nor the West of the right actually exists. The ever-oppressive patriarchal West of the social justice warrior is a figment of their imagination. Sure, there have been grave injustices perpetuated by Westerners in the West, along with basically every other culture in the world. And the West was patriarchal, along with every other culture in the world, I think recently. But to suggest that this is the primary marker of Western culture is reductionistic and basically inaccurate. Likewise, corners of the internet that see Europe as grand and glorious and shining, and a white monarchical Christian civilization with armed knights riding through green pastures to meet the incoming eastern barbarian hordes, all to the soundtrack of Wagner's Tannhauser Overture, are wrong for different reasons. So in many ways, the civilization that emerged after the 5th century in Western Europe was a site of many great triumphs of human culture. Definitely, that's true. And there is something compelling about the remarkably creative and dynamic achievements and progress that we witnessed across the past 2 millennia in Western Europe. But the fact is that neither of these Wests, in inverted commas, exists, and they never have. There is no pure oppressive West, and there is no pure Paleo-Greek Christian West either. They can't be located in history with any reliability, and the interpretation of what the West, their interpretation of what the West is, are driven by an unhealthy nostalgia on both sides. So, if these popular conceptions of Western civilization are not going to help us, where do we turn? And I'm putting those on the table early and then going like that with them, because that might be the main thing that you come across in talking about the West. So let's talk. I'm going to talk about some more sensible people. Many sensible people have actually thought about this problem too, so we're going to draw on their insights and how we might understand Western civilization. These frameworks by which we might identify the West are not ideological, nor are they heavily politicised or found to be relying on nostalgia of a past that never existed. The first example is a historian called Christopher Dawson. He's on our reading list. He's an eminent thinker and historian. And Dawson understands the West to be a consequence of the spiritual vitality, the spiritual energy that's born of the Christian faith. A religious restlessness. He described it as this religious restlessness which seeks change and progress within a stable, overarching cosmic framework. For Dawson, Western culture has as its lifeblood a living faith, which gave Europe a certain sense of spiritual community, but which also gave it a dynamism or a dynamic life, which manifested itself in indirect and unconscious influence that Christianity exercised on the social and intellectual movements, which were avowedly secular. Dawson points to the fact that of there never being a single unitary organisation which has placed its totalitarian influence over all of life. There was never one big government, one big kingdom that dominated the West. And the most dominant institution was the church. But Dawson sees that as contributing substantially to the spiritual life and spiritual unity of the West, but also ensuring that there would never be a unitary political power to override all other forms of social resistance. So Christianity fights against static uniformity and totalitarianism, whilst also maintaining spiritual unity. So that's Christopher Dawson. Let me move on to a different set of thinkers. For example, Steven Pinker. Has anyone here read or heard of Steven Pinker? Yep. Ben Shapiro. Yeah. There's and I'm grouping a few people into probably what's a bit of a motley crew, but Donald Kagan, the Yale classicist, and also Leo Strauss, who's a very famous philosopher of the 20th century. These men all acknowledge the importance of Christianity on the West, and the influence of Christianity on the West, especially for a sense of divine cosmic order. But the Shapiros of the world, I'm going to call them the Shapiros of the world, argue that the Greek focus on philosophy and reason, and the emphasis in classical Greece on human achievement and human capacity, excellence, is the true marker of Western greatness. So can you see the difference here? Whereas Dawson emphasised the importance of Christianity, these thinkers tend to emphasise the importance of the Greek inheritance, particularly focusing on reason and I guess the great things of humanity. And Christianity tends to be characterised by these people as a sort of flaccid, effeminate, anti-humanist force. God is mysterious and unknowable. He's the main subject of the sacred text of Christianity, and man is depicted as this passive receptor of divine mandates. This is how they conceptualise Christianity. But on the other hand, the Greek conception of a reasonable, dynamic humanity undergirds what makes the West great. And so in the Western rationalist tradition, man is the highest being, capable of independent achievement and reason, and they can reach remarkable heights. So the story goes that this human spirit, while Christianity was important, the church squashed this human spirit for a millennium, the Dark Ages, right? The medieval period. Until the Renaissance came along, which was a humanist movement, the beginning of modernity, and then it re-emerged. Human reason, human excellence, and a focus on humanity re-emerged. And some of these thinkers in this group, and this way of thinking, consider it a full-blown triumph that this rationalist strand of the West re-emerged in the Enlightenment. So they're very pro-Enlightenment. Particularly people like Steven Pinker, very pro-Enlightenment. So a totally different take is taken by John Carroll. Now John Carroll is an Australian sociologist. He was Professor of Sociology at La Trobe University. And he spent a lot of time, interesting thinker actually, he spent a lot of time thinking about what lies at the heart of Western civilization. But his interpretation is driven by what he sees as a crisis in the West. So his framing is largely negative, because it's different to the more constructive, positive framing that I've just outlined. Carroll sees the West as a synthesis of Greek and Christian thought. But he characterises them as ego and soul. So ego matches on them to the Greek rationalist, reasonable side of things, and soul is the Christian stream. For Carroll, ego is the internal drive inside individuals to do and be seen to do. It's like an energetic individualism. And this is seen in the heroes of Greek tragedy. If you've ever read Greek tragedy or Greek epics, there's this magnificent sort of human drive that's displayed in the heroes of those tragedies. But he also sees in Martin Luther and in John Calvin a focus on the individual soul before God. So the Christians also contribute to this. And Carroll says it's ego that builds, it's ego that innovates, it's ego that discovers. But It's also ego that kills and destroys and takes what's not its own. He's not overly optimistic about ego. He also says that it's ego that lies behind the Reformation and the Renaissance. That these events tipped the scales, and the pre-existing balance between ego and soul, so he saw there was a balance between these two things. But these events, the Renaissance and the Reformation, tipped the scales in favour of ego, and it's led to a crash in Western culture. Ego triumphed in the 16th century. So you can see here Carroll is lamenting basically what Shapiro and Strauss and Pinker line. They're excited about this, but Carroll's concerned about it. The triumph of ego in the 16th century and into the Enlightenment meant that there's a vacuum of meaning. And so Carroll says we need to recapture the soul aspect of the West, which is basically a sense of transcendence and divine order. So for Carroll, in summary, the West is marked by the presence of a drive to succeed, but also a need to be placed in a higher cosmic order, and within a sense of transcendence. The Western person needs to feel both big and small at the same time. And the West is a civilization for Carroll that encourages and combines this innate drive to create meaning for ourselves and the innate drive to find meaning in transcendence. Remy Bragg is another thinker. Remy Bragg, so Bragg is B-R-A-G-U-E, one of my favourite scholars, historian and philosopher, French, Roman Catholic thinker. He provides a further theory about Western civilization by arguing that the West is basically Roman. What does he mean by Roman? Well, he says that the West is marked less by what it positively holds to or posits in the world, but it's marked more by a stance toward outside influence. For Bragg, the West is Roman because, like Rome itself, it willingly and with some discernment adopts ideas and cultural themes from outside of itself and places those things as driving forces within itself, combines them into a synthesis, and he sees that as what Rome did to the West. So Rome brought the same synthesis that we've been talking about: Hebrew, Christianity, Greco-Roman culture. It was happy to bring both of them in. It was a receptor of these external influences and then was able to kind of harness both of them and drive forward. So you can see it's a stance to the outside world in some sense. So Bragg is defending the thesis that Greece and Christianity have deep influences on Western civilization. He does this by defining the West more by method of inculcating alien elements, welcoming outside influences, rather than saying that the West is Greek or Christian per se. The West is marked by its Romanity, whereby content from outside of itself, from outside its own people, outside of its own culture, beyond its own time, is internally transmitted and brought into its own civilization. So the West is then, according to Bragg, marked out by its interest in otherness. This definition seems counterintuitive to the positive statements of what the content of Western civilization actually is. For Bragg, Western civilization is marked by an attitude to otherness and the willingness and ability to discerningly allow the other to influence and shape itself. And this movement can go back in the other direction too for Bragg. The West can then offer something to the other that it might not have before. Okay, now we're going to get really local. Peter Harrison, Professor of History at UQ. In a 2018 public lecture at the Institute for Advanced Studies in the Humanities at the University of Queensland, Professor Harrison posited his own theory of Western civilization. Now, Bragg is the primary influence of Harrison in this, but Harrison argued that Western European identity can be characterised in terms of its dependency upon and perceived inferiority to traditions that lay beyond its geographical and temporal borders. So that's very similar to Bragg. For Harrison, the Christian West was indebted to something both prior to and outside itself. And for those interested in following this particular lecture up, it's available online at ABC Religion and Ethics. I'm going to put a link here. You can search for it through that. Again, ripping off Bragg, Harrison notes remarkable ways in which Western Europe was home to this dynamic of progress and change. And here we can see echoes of Christopher Dawson as well. That Europe is marked by a culture of renewal and movement. The difference with Harrison is that he sees the dynamic culture of Europe as driven by forces beyond itself or outside itself, as it imbibes key aspects and ideas, whereas Dawson sees this dynamism, this life, as being Christianity. Harrison also critiques the Steven Pinkers of the world, and I guess the Ben Shapiro and others, who invoke the Enlightenment as a triumph of Western civilization and the victory of the Greco-Roman emphasis on reason over the dark forces of irrationalism and fundamentalist religion. Harrison does this by noting that the Enlightenment is marked by a cultural and philosophical hubris, arrogance, which rejected the past and outside sources. So the Enlightenment actually did the opposite of what Western civilization had done historically. In fact, he characterises the Enlightenment as counter-Western in its approach. And he rightly urges people to be wary of those who provoke an idealistic picture of the Enlightenment West. The Enlightenment for Harrison was actually not very Western at all. Indeed, Harrison's critique is even more interesting when he says that Western values, which is a phrase that is often used in political conversations today, Western values is actually a very problematic phrase because it sort of shows that what is Western is hardened into a fixed base of canon, like a fixed canon of works and ideas which are actually largely shaped by the Enlightenment and by the Enlightenment's rejection of the past. Harrison instead argues that the West is marked by preservation of a rich and varied past that can continue to serve as an ongoing challenge to priorities and values of the present. So now it's my job to posit something of my own in amongst this illustrious group of thinkers. And I'm not someone who's impressive or smart as any of the people that I've just talked about. So this is not meant to be authoritative. This is meant to be conversation starting. But I do bring this in here to start to direct us toward the study that we're undertaking together this semester as we read the great books of the Western world. If you look down the list of great books in the unit outline, you'll see a number of non-European works. For example, the Quran, Gilgamesh, the Bible. How are these books Western? Is the West defined somehow by Europe, geographically? Is St. Augustine, who was the Bishop of Hippo in North Africa, Western? Is a Dostoevsky novel Western? Can it be considered European? I'm comfortable with defining the West partly by geography and part by disposition toward the other if I take in some of the ideas of Bragg and Harrison. But also in part by thinking about it expressing a particular view of human nature. So let me briefly address geography and disposition first. If one considers the twin poles of Athens and Jerusalem, or Greece and Christianity, we can start to think about geography. So consider the cultural spread of Greece. With the advent of the Roman Empire, out of the political rulers of Greece, and this empire not abandoned its greatness, but it kept it, retained the intellectual and cultural heritage. And so we have this Greek culture, which is then sort of spread out by the Roman Empire. And the civilization, there's this other civilization that grew around ancient Palestine that was Hebraic, or Jewish. This civilization spawned Christianity, which came to conquer the Roman Empire through religious conversion. So this Greek civilization actually becomes Christian, historically speaking. This civilization's centre of power and cultural influences shifted over the millennia and came to be located first primarily in Italy, but then in France and Germany, and then Anglo-Saxon lands like England. In other words, this Christian Greek civilization moved from Palestine and Greece to Rome, and then west, even further west again. It developed a unified religious culture, but combined with an intellectual culture shaped largely by the integration of Greek philosophy and education practices. So there's the geographical West. What about disposition? Well, I would argue, like Bragg and Harrison, that the disposition of the West is basically Roman, that it's open and willing to engage in conversation with influences beyond its own ethno-national and cultural borders. Likewise, the West is interested in contributing to the conversations that exist outside its own borders. The adoption of high Francophone or French culture in Russia is one example of this. It happened a number of centuries ago. And in some ways, that adoption of Francophone culture brought Slavic parts of Europe into closer cultural contact with Western Europe. So that's just one example of how the West can feed into other cultures. In many ways, the Christian missionary movement is another example of this cultural and religious contribution beyond its own borders. Indeed, surely in some sense, Christianity is a big contributor to this mindset. But Christianity is not an ethnic or culturally bound religion. As is evident from its earlier sacred texts, Christianity cannot, by definition, be imperialist in mindset. The kingdom is not of this world. But it's rather a supra-cultural or above-cultural religion that demands to be spread. Go from Judea to Samaria and then to the ends of the earth. And this religion is adopted and adapted into existing cultures. It changes societies. That much is obvious. But the changes need not be particularly Hebraic or even Western. They only need to be Christian. So Christianity has this approach to cultural influence, which is also present in the way the Western culture spreads to other places too. Western culture is by definition not monolithic, nor is it imperialist. It is rather something which can be adopted and adapted in different contexts. Non-Western countries do not need to become Western in order to be influenced by Western culture. So in short, this position is one which is open to exchange and renewal, and it can go both ways. The Western mind and Western culture is one that's open to influences outside of itself and can accept and might even encourage ideas being adopted and adapted. What does this mean for us though? This is all kind of dense conceptually, right? I'm giving you a pretty tough lecture to start with. Don't worry if you're not following the way all the way along. What does this mean for us as we study Western civilization? Well, it means that our study should be shaped by an openness to what's strange and to what is other. It doesn't mean that we need to agree with everything we read, nor must we read everything that we disagree with. Rather, it means that ideas and concepts which are odd, or unusual, or even unpleasant, ought to be attractive and intriguing for what they might contribute to our own formation. This has been the approach of Western culture. It also explains the inclusion of some of these great non-Western books in the studies that we're undertaking together this semester, like Gilgamesh, a work which has shaped the Western imagination, but is not naturally located as a Western work. Similarly, the Bible is a non-Western cultural product, but it is probably the most influential and widely read work of Western civilization. It is therefore a great book of Western civilization. What about the Quran? Probably the most controversial on the list. Well, we're looking at the Joseph story in both the Bible and the Quran later this semester. And this example is one where a text that is influential in the West also had an influence in another culture. So here we can observe the adoption of a text of Western civilization in a non-Western cultural setting. The Quran is, in this sense, a great book of Western civilization, but it's not in this sense a great book of Western civilization, but rather it's a great book that's been impacted by Western civilization. Now, I'm going to raise another element which I think is really important as we consider what is Western civilization. And as we address some of these questions that we've written up on the board here. Now, Eric Voegelin's a 20th century philosopher, and he sums up Western experience like this. He says, every society is organised for survival in the world, and at the same time, for partnership in an order of being that has its origin in a world transcendent divine being. In other words, societies of humans are seeking for a way to live in the reality in which they find themselves. And in the West, typically that reality has a transcendent origin. There is this conviction that there is something beyond what we see here and now, and that we fit into. It's an objective order, one which is given by God rather than made by man. And he said, Hogan goes on, this struggle for truth, the truth of order, is the very substance of history. And insofar as advances toward the truth are achieved by the societies, indeed as they succeed one another in time, the single society transcends itself and becomes a partner in the common endeavour of mankind. And to paraphrase again, Vogel is not necessarily easy to understand. He's saying each human society is a partner in the common endeavour of mankind to live in the given cosmic transcendent order. The confidence that is given, that this given cosmic order, an order which Christians believe is given by Yahweh, the God of the Bible, is a marker of the West. The West has typically believed that there is something outside of ourselves which we all are trying to fit into and live under. And this gives us confidence to reach out across cultural and geographical boundaries in our search of truth, right? This is what makes us sure that we are surely not the only ones who have special access to the entire human condition and the entirety of human experience. The wisdom of Western civilization can be expressed in the belief that human wisdom is not confined to our own time and place. And therefore we can seek truth because the truth really is out there. We can go and find it because there is an order and a truth that lies beyond us and is founded upon a being outside of us. So much for geography and disposition. There's one more marker which I think we'll zero in on the literature that we're going to read. And this is the understanding of the human condition. Put another way, a third marker of the Western is the Western conception and depiction of human nature. Indeed, it's interesting that the very prominence of human nature and the very emphasis on the human condition is a distinctive of Western literature. Other cultures also ask questions about the human predicament, too, but the West does it in a way that is demonstrably linked to the two poles of Athens and Jerusalem. In his essay entitled Odysseus' Scar, the literary critic Eric Albach describes two different modes of literary representation. One typified by classical Greek literature and the other by the Hebraic Bible. He begins by describing the way in which the Greek poet Homer, has anyone read Homer? Homer portrays the return of the hero of his poem, Odysseus, to his home after so long away on his epic journey. And in typical Homeric style, everything's on the table. The emotions of the situation are fully expressed and explained. The actions of the characters in the scene are described in detail. The meaning of the scene is unhidden, it's fully available to the reader, in the words of the poet. Homer's writing externalizes everything that matters in his story. Everything's available to the reader. You can say in some sense that everything is in the foreground. There's no mystery, nothing hidden. But he does this really interesting thing. He contrasts that with the biblical story of Abraham and the sacrifice of Isaac, or the near sacrifice of Isaac. Now you may not have considered this before, and I actually hadn't either until I read the Auerbach essay, but there's actually very little detail given in the Genesis narrative about this. In fact, it's interesting that what is unspoken and what is unstated is of most significance. The silence of the narrator, the silence of Abraham, the silence of God, is perplexing and penetrating. Rather than the text providing all the answers, we are left with dozens, if not hundreds, of questions. What did the mountain look like they were travelling to? We don't know. What about the surrounding countryside? We don't know. Was the journey hard? What does the story mean? are we told? What was Abraham thinking about? Was he doubting? Was he scared? What was he feeling? Why would God ask him to do this? What does Isaac feel? Is Abraham physically forcing Isaac to get on the altar? Did God intervene verbally or through some other means? These are just some questions that actually aren't answered in the text. If you go back and look, they're not there. The information is not there. We don't know. There's a lack of information in the narrative. As Auerbach says, it's a suggestive influence of the unexpressed. In other words, there's way more going on than what's actually being written down. Note the kinds of questions that you ask with the narrative. Go back and read it maybe tonight or when you have time. You find yourself wrestling with problems because you can't resolve them. They're not solved for you. The author doesn't answer your questions. This is what Auerbach calls a preoccupation with the problematic. But also consider the question of meaning. What does the text in Genesis about the sacrifice of Isaac actually mean? It could have dozens of meanings, couldn't it? Potentially. Some things are clear. Some things are answered in other parts of the Bible. But the text does not just require reading. You can read Homer and you can understand it. But if you read Genesis, you need to interpret it. There's a difference. You need to think about how are we to understand this. We're forced to ask questions about the meaning of the text. We actually have to say to the passage, what do you mean? And here's the contrast. Two literary depictions of reality. Two literary depictions of the human condition. One is externalised. The other is internalised. One is clear, the other is opaque. One reveals everything. The other shrouds almost everything in mystery. And Auerbach's theory is that Western culture is actually a healthy clash of these two styles. A combination of these two elements. Reality is represented in the West somewhere along the spectrum of those two poles, of Athens and Jerusalem. And these two very different depictions of reality, both of them imbibed by the Western mind and present and influential in Western literature, have affected the way that the human condition is depicted and considered. One could argue that Western civilization is marked by a particular approach to the human condition. The problematic of human nature, the human predicament, is approached from two different angles. One attempts to place all explanations in the foreground, explain everything, rationalise everything. It tells us to understand yourself, pick yourself up, and get up, turn the lights on, clean your bedroom, and act. Go out and act, go and do stuff. The other acknowledges the depths of despair, the crisis of the human condition, the great mystery that surrounds and floods reality. The darkness that surrounds us is a problem. But it's not just a problem, it's also something to dwell on. We cannot and we should not simply flood everything with light, because actually the light could be deceiving. In turning on the light, we might lose part of what we're looking at. So I propose, on reflection, that we consider the Western approach to the human condition and the human predicament is marked by a wrestle with reality as we see it. Reality, the revealed, the unknowable, is not the only thing that's actually there. What we can see and what we know now is not the final answer. What we can rationally define is not the conclusion. Western civilization then asks questions rather than just accepting answers. And I hope you can see how this fits into our approach in the classroom as well. It seeks to press further up and further in, rather than simply resting. It asks big questions, and as we'll see in our reading, it tries to both answer them, but also problematise them. For example, humans live in what seems like an orderly cosmos. What is our place in the cosmos? Where do we fit in? What is the history of the cosmos? What is the cosmos' relationship to eternity? Another example. Humans seem to be bound by fate in God's providence. But we also seem to have agency. So are we free? How do we know? What's the relationship between our freedom and God's power and freedom? Is there, if there is no God, but simply blind fate, what does free will mean? Why does it matter? Humans have dignity, but they also have capacity for evil. So what's wrong with us? Are we originally evil, or are we fallen? Is evil an external thing, or is it in our very hearts, in our soul? And how do we rise above our fallen condition? Or, instead of rising above it, should we embrace it? Another problem, or another example, violence is a prevalent part of human life. And you've probably seen how I'm going through the unit at once. But is violence necessary? Is violence a legitimate way of maintaining order in a chaotic world? And if violence is evil, can it also be heroic? As we observe human existence, we see death. Indeed, death dominates our life, and yet we're also alive. So how should we live? How should we live given that we die? How should we die? Can we die well? Can we die for good reasons? Should we want to die? Where does human mortality fit into the cosmic order? And what about love? Is love important given that all humans are mortal and therefore temporary? And what happens after death? So perhaps you can see now how the two poles of Athens and Jerusalem inform the Western analysis of the human predicament. Perhaps you can see how a Western approach to the examination of human life is marked by both a reasonable, accessible reality that we believe is orderly, but it's actually also shrouded in mystery and darkness. So what then is Western civilization? What are we doing looking at great books of the Western world? After reflecting on the above, I must circle back to that opening and try and answer that question. But maybe I should not do that. Maybe I need to let the reality of Western civilization be shrouded in mystery. That would be a very Western thing to do. We know that something like the West exists, but we also know that it is not immediately obvious what it is or what it means. So, this unit is intended to be an exploration of some of the big questions that our civilization has asked of the given solid reality that is around us and inside of us. It's a brief tour of some of the greatest literary artefacts of the Western world, artefacts which show how the West both portrays reality and questions it. It is a tour of Western depictions of the human condition and the transcendent order within which the human is situated. And so we'll return to this question of Western civilization at the end of the unit again. I'm going to let the question hang in the air and let the texts and you do the talking now.